Well, welcome to the Christ-centered cosmic civilization. We're doing one more episode on the Magi. We have actually tons of documents we wanted to go through, but we'll have to save those to another year. Next year, maybe, we'll have a look at some more stuff. This is enough for this year. We'll get through whatever we can in this episode, and then we must stop, because we want to get back to... There's episodes on... the immutability of God, that was a series that I was running, and we interrupted it for lots of Christmas material and Nicaea and things. So let's do that, and then after that, who knows what we'll get into. But let's get back to the Magi. So what it is Jesus, the baby Jesus, has told them to read out to him the document that they brought, that's been handed down since Adam, Noah, and so on. And I'm going to read now from the Armenian Infancy Gospel. It says, "This is the beginning of the document that was written and sealed for keeping, which the Magi consider themselves unworthy to open or to give to any of the priests to read and for the people to hear, as they were deemed unworthy, since they were not children of the kingdom and were to denounce the Saviour." So it's like only people who are sufficiently worthy and appointed are able to read this document. But here's the text of it. It says this, and I'm going to just read it now. "After the expulsion of Adam from the garden and Cain's killing of his brother Abel, Adam mourned over his son's death more than his own expulsion. God gave Adam a son, Seth, which means son of consolation. Since Adam first desired to become divine..." Oh, this is a commentary on that now. The Magi comment on it and say, "Since Adam first desired to become divine, God condescended to become human because of his abundant compassion and love for humankind. Through his intercession, God vowed and swore to the forefather to write a document and to seal it with his finger, that, quote, in the 6,000th year, on the 6th day, I shall send my only begotten Son, God the Word, who shall come to take a body from your descendants. My Son shall become the Son of Man, and I shall restore you to your former glory. Then shall you, Adam, become bodily immortal, divine, united with God as one of us, knowing good and evil." So that's the text of the document. Adam is comforted with this new son, Seth, but then the promise is given in the 6,000th year, on the 6th day, the only begotten Son will become human, come flesh. And then through that, Adam's immortality will be restored. And then he will know good and evil the right way through Jesus. So isn't that fascinating? So hear the idea, because 6 is the number of humanity, because humanity is created on the 6th day. So here it's in the 6,000th year of the world, Jesus would be born on the 6th day. So born on a Friday, yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, born on a Friday.
Because he's got to have a perfect life that begins and ends on the same day, even the same moment. If it's God, he's got to have the most perfect life. That is a definite idea. It's got to be exactly the same. And if you've got a totally lunar calendar, the days of the month are the same. If you've got a solar calendar, each month the days just change each time. Whereas in the Second Temple sort of stuff, and really as the Bible has it, because you get in the Law of Moses, he says on this day of the month it will be a Sabbath, so he knows it's a Saturday based on what day of the month it is. Whereas once you've got lunar solar, that stops working. So yeah, it is that they're literally the exact same day following a lunar calendar, And we should do, because in Genesis,
Yeah, we definitely should have a lunar calendar.
Yeah, in Genesis, that's why he made the moon. It's crazy we never use the moon.
I know. So, and we follow the Julius Caesar scheme, which is completely pagan, with midnight, and we like Julius Caesar for other reasons. But anyway, so there it is. There's this document been passed down since the time of Adam. Adam was promised that God would be born, but after 6,000 years, on the sixth day, and that birth of God would reverse all that had gone wrong with Satan. Amazing. I love that, the text of the actual document handed down from Adam. So he reads it out, it's read out, and then it says, going back to the Armenian infancy thing, the kings and princes had spent 3 days at the cave, fulfilling their vows and petitions. Taking counsel, they said, let's go together to the cave and bow down to him and confess him as God. Then go forth on our way in peace. And they all agreed. So they do, the kings and princes. So that's, again, that idea of the 3 plus the 12. And we get that 15 number, which is in the Bible and it's in all these traditions. So I think we got to be confident on this, that there are 3, but there's also 12 and we end up with 15. So the 15 and Joseph's possibly managing them, but they enter the cave together, bowed down to Jesus, confessed him and said, you are true God and Son of God. And then they left the cave with great rejoicing, glorifying God. That's interesting, isn't it? A very high Christology just naturally coming out of their mouths without the later Nicene and post-Nicene sort of philosophical abstractions. They're just confessing this, in their own way of saying it.
Yeah, and as we thought because it's still the 16th centenary year of Nicaea, as we thought when we were doing that series, ante-Nicene creeds do refer to this sort of true God, do refer to Jesus as true God. So that is a very ancient way of referring to him that is totally in line. That is what everyone would have said. So that's not at all a sort of late development, as people might imagine.
Yeah, because often that idea is like John must have been written later because he has a high Christology, a very clear view of Jesus as God. Yeah, well, yeah, he does, but so does Mark, so does Matthew, so does Luke, so does everybody. And why do you think that's late? Like, that's literally as he's been born, you've got these people coming from all over the world just openly confessing he's God. So it's early Christology. It's not late Christology. So that is just nonsense. Anyway, so after these events, they're told don't go back to Herod. Obviously, we know that. Like, don't go back to Herod. He's a loser. So after these events, I'm quoting now again from the Armenian Infancy Gospel. After these events, Joseph and Mary with the child stayed quietly in the cave so no one would know. But listen this, Joseph kind of he's like an amazing man. He is one of my favorite characters in the Bible. It says this: Joseph took all the valuable gifts and items from the treasure the Magi had given and hid them. And then Joseph went out daily to towns, villages, and farms to provide for their physical needs. And then it says, whenever Joseph went out for food and supplies, his son Josiah, or Josies, the youngest of the brothers, was appointed as guardian and attendant to the Holy Virgin Mary. I think this is a lovely little insight into the Holy Family, where there's Josiah, presumably Joseph, is there looking after Mary, and he's from Joseph, so Joseph's son, but looking after this new Mary as his stepmom sort of thing. But also Joseph's saying, oh, well, we've got lots of resources now. And he's not thinking, therefore we will live the high life. They're carrying on, presumably living in whatever circumstances. I think they do move into a house in Bethlehem, because it says later, I think Matthew references a house. So people come to the house. So they maybe use some money, possibly, I don't know, to you get some, but whatever. But basically, he's using all these resources just to go round and help needy people.
Yeah, it is amazing, and it's worth that Josies guy, because he gets mentioned early in Acts. They almost make him one of the 12 apostles, and they pick Matthias and said, "Oh, the Lord picks Matthias," but everyone thinks, "Oh, you got to have Josies." So he's an incredible person, and Saint Papias had loads of stories, because I think he may have known Josies, or he may have known people who knew Josies. He's an incredible person, so it's lovely to see him again, because there's loads of fascination with James, the brother of God, because he gets mentioned by Josephus and Hegesippus and so on. But then Josies often gets overlooked, especially because so people are like Matthias got picked, so he must have been rubbish. It's like, no, not rubbish. He was like, and then the Lord had something else planned for him, and he did this other sort of ministry that the 72 have, and he did a great job, as Papias and others tell us, and he was totally humble. He had no sort of ambition or pride. He didn't attack Matthias or anything like that, so he's a great person. So I do love seeing any more data we can get on Josies, because we know there was loads that Papias had, and we know Armenians loved Papias, so this might even be from his own memoirs that Papias had. We don't know, but I always love finding out more about him.
Nice. Now, what comes next is something that some of us might find unusual, so I'm just going to brace everyone for this. This is something which, if you're used to the ancient ways of thinking about the baby Jesus and the life of Jesus, you'll have come across this before. But for modern people who are a bit like Pope, remember when we started with Pope Leo, and he wanted to emphasize that Jesus was absolutely normal human, and there was nothing unusual about his humanity at all. Pope Leo's a kind of an outlier there. Like most ancients knew, he wasn't totally normal human in that sense. This is divine flesh, and there's a lot about that. I'm trying not to be too distracted by it at the moment. I'm gonna read a section of the Armenian Infancy Gospel now. It's about the circumcision of Jesus, and you'll hear there's something very unusual. And then we'll ask PJ to comment about this and how did they solve this problem that they had. So here it is. It says, when the child was 8 days old, Joseph said to Mary, "What shall we do, since the law requires circumcision on the 8th day?" Mary replied, "Let it be as you wish, do as you please." Joseph quietly went to Jerusalem and brought back a wise, good, compassionate, and God-fearing man named Joel, who was well versed in the divine law. They came to the cave. When they drew the knife, it would not cut the child. Seeing this, they were greatly amazed and said, "Look, no blood dripped from this child." He was given the name Jesus as the angel had named him. So they make the normal arrangements. A guy comes to do the circumcision, tries to do it, but cannot cut the flesh of Jesus. And then we're given no solution. Like, how did they then carry out the circumcision? First of all, what's going on here? Why can't they circumcise him? And then in a minute, we'll think about what possibly they did to solve this.
So no part of Jesus can see decay. We're told that in the Gospels, also in prophecy. So the idea that you just can, just as easily as anything else, just cut off bits of Jesus and then you've got lots of, yeah, that's the question. If you cut off a bit of Jesus, will that become living and then never die and never decay? Well, you'd think you'd have to if he ever did. Yeah. It's literally impossible for his flesh to decay.
And implied behind this, though we won't think about it now, is all that idea of the Holy Grail and capturing his blood in a cup and all that. Because modern people just don't bother with that, or modern Western people would, in the main, tend to go, yeah, whatever, like, who cares? It's just human flesh, it's just human blood. But ancients and medievals, and still a lot of people today, no, this is God's blood, God's flesh. This is not like anything else. And so, similarly, you can't just, cut a bit off the flesh of God, because one, what would happen to it? And we may think about that as well, but also, how do you make damage God's flesh?
And on that, Sir Ian Paisley does in his Christian Fundamental as a fantastic defense of the Holy Grail. So as you were saying, like in the West, we've lost the Holy Grail, sort of, but it has had its defenders.
It's like the ultimate Protestant, the Reverend Dr. Ian Paisley, the ultimate Protestant, is actually the most intense advocate for the reality of the Holy Grail. If you don't know about that, just look it up, and he's very, very strong on the physicality of the Grail and the blood of God and so on. But what about this? They can't cut his flesh because you can't harm him, and the ancient prophets would say this. So how is it done? Unless he allows them to do it. So one solution is that they ask him, will you allow us to cause damage to your flesh? And of course, we've seen that people do chat to the baby Jesus, and he replies. So one possible solution is they did that. And of course, later, when it comes to his death, he says, no man can take my life from me. No one can harm me. And I must kind of allow them. I must lay down my life, allow myself to be killed. Then I can be killed. Jesus teaches this openly in the Gospels. So perhaps they did that and said, look, baby Jesus, will you allow us to harm your flesh to carry out circumcision? And that's one solution. But there's another tradition that means, like, because Joel just brought a normal kind of blade that would work on normal human flesh. But there is a kind of tradition that either that the Magi provided such a blade, like a blade that had been secretly prepared in advance that was sanctified for this purpose, or that there is a particular kind of blacksmith that was kind of set apart and filled with divine power to produce such a blade. Is this right, PJ?
Yeah, so we think about Samson. He's got a lot of parallels with Jesus, and he sort of a key theme towards the end of his life. Delilah knows how to, because he's anointed, so he just can't be killed no matter how much people try. He is a Messiah in the Hebrew. He's
immune to damage, cannot be overwhelmed.
Yeah. So then there has to be specific tools have to be gotten, specific preparations have to be made. And, you get, as Jesus dies, it's the same sort of thing. There's all these prophecies. It's like, this will happen. And because, like, Samson isn't supposed to drink anything related to grapes. And then Jesus has to have vinegar on the cross. And then you get all this.
All of these are ways of making it possible for his body to be injured.
Yeah. So there is that there are preparations that can be made, but like Jesus has to tell you, and he doesn't just freely tell everyone how to do it, and but he does, and he sort of somehow mysteriously instructs the centurion Longinus, and we know Longinus is very tapped into spiritual realities, and he gets stuff no one else does. So that is obvious in a sense from the Gospels. That is what's going on, and from Samson's life and in other places, that a Messiah, and certainly not the Messiah, can be killed in this way. So there are in Anglo-Saxon art, Anglo-Saxons think a lot, and not just Anglo-Saxons, Franks, Alemannians, and Norse and everything. Think about a particular figure called Wayland Smith. He's an Englishman.
We love him.
Yeah, he's an Englishman who sort of understands the power behind words and behind smithing. So he's able to create blades, especially blades, other sort of artifacts that have powers that really, like, humanity should have access to all of this when we make stuff, but we're
fallen and broken, aren't we? And we have trouble making anything, really. And when we do make things, they break down and all that. But we're supposed to make things like Wayland could still do.
So among his famous swords he has made, and he supposedly can still make them. He lives in a parallel sort of world.
The Fey world.
Yeah.
Listeners of this podcast know about the Fey world.
So he's busy. He does a lot of stuff, this Wayland guy. So one of his swords is called Durandal, and that was wielded by one of Charlemagne's paladins, and it's totally unbreakable. It's still there. It was hurled by Roland, was it? Yeah, it was hurled by Roland into a mountain, and because it could not be broken, it split the side of the mountain. You can see it to this day. There is Durandal in the wall. And all of that, and
Doesn't the English monarch have a Wayland's?
yeah, he's got Cortana.
Cortana, right?
And you've got an AI named after Cortana, and that, yeah,
From Halo, yeah.
yeah.
That's it.
So yeah, Wayland's got amazing sort of power and knowledge and all of that, and so he in English stuff and in there's a Frankish casket that depicts him, but other stuff as one of the wise men that comes to see Jesus.
So he could have been in the entourage.
Yeah, and as we thought, there are those stories, other people who are tuned into heavenly realities can see the star, and then people whose minds are darkened, like Herod and the people of Jerusalem, they can't see the star, but then obviously Wayland could, if he's able to craft Durandal, if he's able to go to the Fey realms, apparently more or less at will, he's able to do this. So they say he's perhaps been instructed by the baby Jesus, but he's got the skill to carry out Jesus' instructions, to create the blade necessary to create the divine circumcision, to remove the divine prepuce, and then to create, what often gets called like the inch of God. There's a little bit
Divine
of
precipice.
yeah. There's a little bit of God, because it can never decay, and we thought about that. There's a little bit of that around. So it's something that has a huge amount of thought throughout history, and then people, since the 19th century, just get very squeamish. They're like, oh, forget about it, don't think about it. But then it's like, no, the Bible, no part of his flesh can decay. A bit gets cut off. What happens? What does that mean?
And wars get fought over the ownership of this piece of the flesh of God, of course. And it disappears in, is it the 1970s? Because someone steals it.
This sort of thing happens a lot to all the greatest relics. They disappear and then they come back again as constant signs. There have to be miraculous things have to bring things back. And like the Ark of the Covenant is a great example of a relic that keeps having miraculous things that
preserve it or reveal it and so on.
We get that a lot in Judges and in Samuel, and yeah. So we know this sort of thing happens. So it's
in the Bible,
missing.
but this sort of thing happens even after the Bible. So yeah, the divine flesh that is cut off, partly because Jesus allows them to do it, but also perhaps there is this thing, the idea that there's a special blade prepared for this very task. And Wayland may have been, there's the legends that he was accompanying the Magi, or may have been one of the Magi, and has a suitable blade which he could leave. This podcast and all my work depends entirely on donations. It's only through your support that all this research and teaching can be free for so many. If you're in a position to help, please consider supporting the mission by giving to the Biblical Frameworks charity. Find out how at biblicalframeworks.com and look for the Give link. Thank you.
We can only imagine the Cave of Mysteries would have the sort of information necessary.
The Cave of Mysteries, of course, that they may well have had that blade, or at least how to make it. So it's interesting. All we can say from the Armenian Infancy Gospel is that they were unable to just, at least they couldn't just do the circumcision easily. Someone suggested, though, that they were able to cut off his flesh, but it was no blood came forth. So that was the point being said in the Armenian Gospel. I'm not sure, though, because it just says it wouldn't cut the child at all. Anyway, whatever happens, they do obviously eventually able to complete the circumcision, because the Bible says that he was actually circumcised and given the name Jesus. Okay, now, after that, the child grew, and I'm reading again now from the Armenian Infancy Gospel. The child grew and increased in grace and strength. Joseph and Mary stayed in the cave until the beginning of the 40-day fast. Now, so they're in the cave, That's where the birth happens. There is the hostel, because remember, this cave is attached to this house, a lodging house, isn't it? And the Magi are, in Matthew, the Magi like originally go to the motel and then are directed to the dumpster round the back where Mary and Joseph are. So Mary and Joseph stay, and they stay for until the beginning of this 40-day fast. The Magi, Herod's unhappy because he figures out what's happened, that the Magi have not returned to him. We'll come back to them in a moment, but first of all, Joseph and Mary take Jesus to be presented at the temple, along with many gifts and sacrificial offerings received from the Magi. So the Magi have things that they then take to the temple to give. They present him at the Holy Temple in accordance with their tradition with a pair of turtle doves, 2 young pigeons. There's Simeon, and he's like, gives his prophecies and so on. Then they return to Bethlehem, stay in the cave for many days until the beginning of the new year. So that this document has him there for like an entire year, basically. His entire first year living in secret in the cave. Maybe they get to use some of the facilities at the motel, I don't know. Or some people have speculated that they could have used some of the money to get better lodgings. But here they say, no, he's in the cave for the whole year.
Or if it's in January and then 40 days brings you to February, so then isn't the beginning of the year March?
Oh, it could be as quick as that. Okay.
Could be, as Passover's to be the first month.
Yeah, okay.
Could be.
But here it says, when the child Jesus was 9 months old, he was no longer fed from his mother's breast. Observing him, they were very surprised and kept asking each other, what child is this? He neither eats nor drinks nor sleeps, but stays up, wakeful and watchful day and night. Wow. So they have it as like he only needed sustenance for the first 9 months, after which he just fasts and prays day and night, even as a 9-month-old baby.
Yeah. And you do get that in the Psalms. He's the one who never slumbers and all of this. You know, you do get that. And the day and night, you know, he's praying and meditating on scripture day and night. That's all got its psalmic basis.
And of course, Moses, when he's on Sinai for 40 days and then for another 40 days, 80 days, nearly 3 months, he neither drank nor ate.
Wow.
Yeah, that's all in the book of Exodus. Check it out. Moses neither drank anything nor ate anything for a total of at least 80 days. And why that's important is it's as if we're assume like, oh, you got to eat and drink, like, because otherwise we would perish. Well, yes, now under our conditions of fallenness and so on, but it's as if Moses is there, like tapping into the divine life in such intensity that Moses doesn't drink any water, no liquid at all, doesn't eat anything at all for 90 days, and yet he's still like completely full of life and power, such that even, remember, he's well over 80 years of age at this time. And when he's 120, the scripture says it's as if he's still a young man and everything. So the Bible is preparing us for this idea that there is a kind of humanity that doesn't require the sort of sustenance that we assume is essential to humanity. But they, in this document, they're sort of saying, well, look, here's this baby who's really human, but he doesn't seem to require sustenance or rest as other children do. Well, amazing stuff. Well, let's just bring it to a close, because this document, the Armenian Infancy Gospel, then goes back to Herod thinking through, like, the Magi have tricked us. He summons his advisors, and he kind of thinks, we gotta go and kill the Holy Family, basically. And his advisors go, yeah, let's do that. So he commands his armies, 18 legions. This is what the Armenian Infancy Gospel says. 18 legions of soldiers to march through his domain and kill every male child, saying, "Do not have mercy on male children, nor on their crying fathers and mothers. Don't accept bribes, slaughter them all." So all the commanders and heads of the armies immediately gathered, thousands upon thousands, with swords and weapons. And then it says they went everywhere and massacred all the children in 84 villages, numbering a total of 1,460 souls. Wow. Incredibly intense. All in the hope of killing Jesus.
And it's mentioned after this in the whole document that among the victims is Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist.
Wow.
Because Jesus mentions, I believe in the Gospel of Luke, that he says all the martyrs from Abel to Zechariah, who was slain before the altar. So he's at the altar of the temple, or, you know, and he gets killed there, it's mentioned. And that's why John is raised in the desert. Because that is also mentioned in Luke, that he's raised in the desert until it's the time for him to preach.
So John has to be hidden in the desert because of this massacre time. Wow, and Zechariah, to protect him, gives up his own life. What a great extra story there. Well, there it is. Thanks for listening to this series where we focused on the Magi and been through and examined lots of the traditions and thought through what's going on in these traditions that have been handed down. What did they mean? Why did people think like that? Why did they maybe happen? Hopefully that's been interesting to you, and maybe next Advent period we may revisit. We've got more documents that are of a similar kind, and PJ might help us to understand them next Christmas.